Hey everyone, I'm Amber Wilson, 28, a marketing specialist from Boston. And if you've ever felt completely out of place at a family gathering, buckle up, because tonight I'm sitting in the most expensive restaurant I've ever seen, watching my sister-in-law Madison smirk as a waiter presents a dinner bill for $180,000. Yes, you heard that right. 180 grand. Oh, Sis-In-Law, she says sweetly, all innocent and glowing under the chandeliers, we forgot our purse and cards. I'm sitting there with 17s in my checking account, maxed out credit cards, and a fake smile that's about to crack. But before we get to that moment, the one that turned an elegant anniversary dinner into an unforgettable showdown, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt like the odd one out at a family function, you're in good company. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because this story might just make your own family drama look tame. Let me take you back. I grew up in a small town in rural Massachusetts. My dad was a high school teacher, and my mom ran a cozy little bakery on Main Street. We didn't have a lot, but we had enough. We always had food on the table, love in the house, and dreams for the future. But luxury vacations, brand name clothes, or even ordering takeout more than once a month, not part of the vocabulary. In high school, I juggled part-time jobs just to save up for college. I was lucky enough to earn a scholarship to Boston University, where I majored in marketing and communications. That's where I met Ryan Thompson. Ryan was tall, kind-eyed, genuinely funny, the kind of guy who actually listened when you talked. While a lot of the business students at BU bragged about their internships at their dad's hedge funds or their Rolexes, Ryan showed up in a practical car and wore sweaters that looked like he actually picked them out himself. We met during a group project junior year, and after a few late-night study sessions and coffee runs, we were inseparable. I didn't find out about his family right away. He was modest, said his parents owned some restaurants. Just restaurants, huh? Well, just restaurants turned out to mean Thompson Restaurant, Group 37 high-end dining spots across 6 states, a sprawling family compound on Martha's Vineyard, and a private jet they used when, and I quote commercial, is just too much of a hassle. Meeting the Thompsons was intimidating. Ryan's dad, Richard Thompson, built the empire from scratch. He bought his first diner at 22 and turned it into an upscale dining juggernaut. Even now, in his 60s, he had this no-nonsense entrepreneur energy, the type who still wakes up at 5 a.m., but now wears custom suits and casually orders $1,000 bottles of wine like they're sodas. His mom, Elizabeth, came from old Boston money, like pearls at breakfast type of money. But she surprised me. She wasn't cold or condescending. She asked about my major, my family's bakery, even complimented my homemade banana bread. She had that quiet kind of grace that made you feel seen. Then there was Madison, Ryan's younger sister by 2 years. And if Elizabeth was all elegance and curiosity, Madison was elegance and ice. She had her mom's looks, but not her warmth. From the moment we met, she looked at me like I was a social experiment gone wrong. You know the look, like she was mentally calculating the price of my department store dress and deciding I didn't quite make the cut. Marketing, how interesting, she'd said during our first dinner. Her tone made it sound like I'd said professional nap taker. Oh, I suppose every business needs someone to run their social media. Madison had gone to Wharton. She worked for the family business, but most of her day seemed to involve Instagramming from yachts and attending charity galas. Her husband, Derek Holloway, came from real estate royalty. Together, they were the golden couple, beautiful, wealthy, and casually dismissive of anyone who couldn't afford their lifestyle. My first Christmas with the Thompsons eye-opening. The gift exchange included Cartier bracelets, Louis Vuitton bags, luxury spa retreats. I had made homemade candles and spent a whole week baking specialty cookies with my mom's secret recipes. Madison unwrapped my gift, held up the candle with her fingers like it was a used sock, and said with a tight smile, "How crafty." Ryan, thank God, wasn't like the rest of them. He and I were built on something real. When he proposed after 2 years, it wasn't with a flashy diamond, but with his grandmother's ring. I loved it. Madison, not so much. You could have had it reset in platinum, I overheard her whispering to Ryan at our engagement party. Just saying. We tried to find a middle ground with the wedding. I didn't want a circus. Madison had flown in a Grammy winner for her reception. We compromised. It was fancier than anything my family had experienced, but it still felt like us. Afterward, Ryan and I moved into a brownstone in Boston's South End. Beautiful, but sensible. We chose it for the investment, not the prestige. Ryan started working as an executive in the Thompson Empire, but he made it clear he wanted to earn his role, not inherit it. I respected that. I was at a boutique marketing firm, grinding through 10-hour days, trying to make a name on my own. But that independence, it didn't sit well with Madison. She lived in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking the harbor, drove a Tesla SUV that matched Derek's. Family dinners turned into subtle digfests. She'd compliment our adorable little place or ask with a grin when Ryan would finally step up and take on more responsibility. Through it all, Ryan had my back. But the truth is, he was used to this world. He didn't always see what I saw. The digs, the pressure, the way people measured you by your clothes, your wine knowledge, your zip code. Then came the big news. Richard and Elizabeth were planning a 40th wedding anniversary celebration. I knew it'd be a big deal. I didn't expect it to be a turning point in everything. At a family dinner, they brought it up casually, over filet mignon and lobster bisque, of course. 40 years deserves something special, Richard said, raising his wine glass. We're thinking Lucille. Lucille, not a restaurant, a culinary temple, 3 Michelin stars, waiting list that stretches months, the kind of place where the wine list is on an iPad and the dessert has actual gold leaf on it. Madison lit up. Perfect. I know the executive chef from a gala. I'll start a planning committee. Elizabeth added, we want it to be intimate. 40 guests for 40 years, just family and a few friends. Amber can handle the invitations, Madison said, waving me off like a secretary. Actually, Ryan chimed in, Amber's a marketing expert. She could lead the communications. Madison's smile tightened. Of course, she said through her teeth. Then Richard dropped the bomb. We'll split the celebration costs equally among the children. Your mother and I just want to enjoy ourselves. My stomach sank. Split equally, with Madison and Derek. It sounded fair, but it wasn't. Not for us. That night back at our brownstone, I brought it up gently while Ryan was hanging up his suit jacket. So, what do you think the equal contribution means? Like in dollars? He shrugged casual. I don't know. A few thousand, maybe? A few thousand, I repeated, trying to keep my tone neutral. That's a lot for us right now. He sat down beside me, concern starting to show on his face. Yeah, I guess, with your company's slow quarter and that bathroom leak we just fixed, it is tight. But this is a big deal for my parents. We'll make it work. I nodded, not wanting to start an argument, but inside I was spiraling. Making it work meant pushing our already stretched budget past the breaking point. The next morning, I did some digging. Lucille didn't list its prices online, which is never a good sign. But from reviews and blogs, I found out their tasting menu alone started at $400 per person. That didn't include drinks tax or gratuity. Multiply that by 40 guests, add in wine pairings, and you're looking at a small fortune. I was estimating at least $32,000 total. If we were expected to cover a quarter of that, it would be more than our mortgage for the next 4 months. So I got to work, canceled my gym membership, stopped eating out, packed every single lunch, took on weekend freelance gigs. Ryan chipped in, 2 cut down on golfing, skipped the pricey business lunches. But honestly, I don't think he felt the pressure the same way I did. Maybe he never really had to. Meanwhile, Madison had turned the anniversary planning into her full-time job. She set up a separate email thread for updates, sent mood boards, daily reminders. She even created a mini calendar of optional pre-celebration events, spa days, brunches, shopping excursions. Optional in name, only when you're the only one who doesn't show up. It's not just noticed, it's noted. 3 weeks out, I finally decided to talk to her directly. I caught her between her morning Pilates class and lunch at some place with an accent in its name. "Hey, Madison, I wanted to talk about the anniversary budget." "What about it?" she replied, already disinterested. "I just wanted to let you know, Ryan and I are on a tighter budget than you might think. We're trying to figure out how to contribute without breaking the bank." There was a pause, a silence just long enough to be uncomfortable. "Amber," she finally said, her tone syrupy and sharp, all at once, "this is my parents' 40th anniversary. If you and Ryan can't afford to participate properly, maybe you need to rethink your priorities." It took every ounce of restraint I had not to hang up right then. "I'm not saying we won't contribute," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm just asking if there's a way to adjust expectations or find a more affordable path." "Well, the plans are already set," she replied flatly. "If you're having financial difficulties, that's really between you and Ryan. Don't try to diminish this celebration just because you didn't plan ahead." Click, she hung up. I stared at my phone for a few seconds, equal parts angry and humiliated. A few hours later, I got an email with the final menu selections. She'd added a Dom Perignon champagne toast. I didn't even bother checking the price. Then came what Madison dubbed Ladies' Preparation Day. It was supposed to be a fun little bonding moment with Elizabeth, the wives of Richard's brothers, and me. The itinerary: full salon treatments, lunch at a French bistro, and a shopping trip to find something for Amber to wear. I arrived at the salon early, hoping to talk to Elizabeth privately. But when the group showed up 20 minutes late, Madison came in first, decked out in designer workout gear that probably cost more than our monthly grocery bill. "Sorry we're late," she chirped. "Mom and I were finalizing surprise details for the big night." Elizabeth greeted me kindly. "Amber, darling, you look tired. Is everything all right?" I didn't get a chance to respond. "She's fine, Mom," Madison said, cutting in. "Everyone's getting the works today. Hair, nails, makeup, the whole thing. My treat." Now to the outside world, this probably looked generous, but I knew Madison's playbook. This was about making sure we all looked like we belonged in Lucille, or more accurately, making sure I looked like I didn't. Still, I smiled and thanked her. Elizabeth was watching, and I didn't want to start anything. The salon was undeniably luxurious. The stylists were magicians. But as I sat there under a blow-dryer, Madison strolled around, showing photos of the restaurant's private dining room on her phone. "We've arranged for a custom menu with wine pairings for each course," she bragged. "And wait until you see the flowers. They're being flown in from Holland." After the salon, we headed to lunch at a place where even the salad cost $30. Madison ordered champagne without even glancing at the price. When the check came, she did what she always did. "Oh no," she gasped, patting her handbag. "I must have left my wallet at the salon." And of course she turned to me. "Amber, would you mind covering? I'll pay you back tomorrow." The bill was over $400. I handed over my card with a tight smile, already doing the mental math and realizing I'd need to cancel the grocery delivery I had scheduled that evening. "You're such a lifesaver," Madison cooed. "Oh, and I made dinner reservations for tonight, too. The men are golfing, so let's continue our little day." Elizabeth, bless her, jumped in. "Actually, I'm feeling a bit tired. Perhaps we should save our energy for tomorrow's celebration." Madison pouted, but gave in. "Fine. But we do need to find something for Amber to wear. That Christmas party dress won't cut it for Lucille." Cue shopping trip number 3 that week. The boutique Madison dragged us to looked more like a museum than a clothing store. The staff greeted her like royalty and brought out dress after dress for me. Every time I found something I liked, Madison rejected it. Too casual, too loud, too last season. Then she held up a sleek black dress, classic, cut modest neckline, but an eye-watering price tag of $995. This one, she declared, perfect and understated. I stared at the tag, trying to think of a polite way to say, absolutely not. Elizabeth noticed. "Madison, dear," she said gently, "perhaps Amber already has something suitable. Not everyone needs a new outfit for every occasion." Madison's smile was tight. "We're celebrating at the most exclusive restaurant in Boston, Mom. I'm just trying to make sure everyone looks the part." Eventually, I settled for a dress from the sale rack. Still way more than I wanted to spend, but at least it wouldn't sink my rent. As we left the store, I lagged a few steps behind. That's when I heard Madison speaking to Elizabeth. "I just don't understand why Ryan doesn't help her more financially. It's honestly embarrassing watching her count pennies." And then Elizabeth replied, quiet but clear, "Madison, not everyone measures success by their bank account." By the time I got home that night, I felt like I'd been emotionally hit by a freight train. The fake smiles, the silent digs, the passive-aggressive jabs, they'd taken their toll. And knowing the biggest event was still ahead of me, it made my stomach turn. Ryan came home close to midnight, a little tipsy from drinks with his dad and Derek after their golf outing. He dropped his keys in the bowl by the door and looked at me with a soft smile. "Hey, did you have fun with the ladies?" I didn't even try to sugarcoat it. "Madison orchestrated the entire day just to remind me I don't belong in your family." He frowned. "Amber, come on. She made me pay for everyone's $400 a lunch because she forgot her wallet," I said, my voice tight. "Then she tried to get me to buy a $1,000 dress and made sure I felt like a bargain bin reject when I didn't." Ryan sighed and pulled me close. "Tomorrow will be better. It's just one night and then it's over." I wanted to believe him, I really did. But I had no idea just how wrong he was. The next evening, the big night arrived, the 40th anniversary dinner, and Boston delivered with the kind of crisp golden autumn evening you see in movies. Ryan and I took an Uber to Lucille because parking in that neighborhood was a luxury in itself, and I wasn't about to tack on another $60 to this financial circus. When we stepped off the elevator into Lucille, it was like entering another world. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows wrapped around the top floor, showcasing a panoramic view of the Boston skyline and harbor. Chandeliers sparkled overhead. Waitstaff glided around in black tuxedos like silent, graceful shadows. Everything smelled faintly of truffle and saffron. It was breathtaking and honestly a little overwhelming. A sharply dressed host greeted us. "Thompson's Celebration." Ryan nodded, and we were escorted past dining rooms filled with Boston's elite into a private space at the back. And it was stunning. Thousands of white roses and lilies. Custom menus printed on thick ivory paper with gold-foiled calligraphy. A quartet playing soft classical music in the corner. The lighting was warm, glowy, dreamlike. Madison had gone all out. Richard and Elizabeth were already there, standing like royalty at the center of the room, him in a crisp tuxedo, her in an elegant blue gown that made her silver hair look regal. Elizabeth pulled me into a warm hug. "You look lovely, dear," she said, giving my sale rack dress a genuine nod of approval. "Thank you for being here tonight." Madison and Derek made their grand entrance shortly after, like celebrities arriving fashionably late. Madison wore a couture gown that sparkled like ice, and the diamonds around her neck could probably pay off my student loans 3 times over. Derek, as always, looked like he'd stepped out of a fashion catalog. Confident, effortless, untouchable. The seating arrangement, clearly orchestrated by Madison, placed Ryan and me directly across from her and Derek, with Richard and Elizabeth at the heads of the table. Champagne was served immediately. Not just any champagne. The sommelier launched into a poetic description of the rare vintage the family who grew the grapes, the specific hillside in France it came from. Each bottle, I later found out, cost more than some people's monthly rent. Richard stood for a toast. "To 40 years, with the most extraordinary woman I've ever known," he said, looking at Elizabeth. "And to the family we've built our greatest achievement." Everyone raised their glasses, clink, and then the courses began. First up, Ozetra caviar with creme fraiche and flecks of gold leaf. Yes. Gold. Ensued, the sommelier returned with a perfectly paired white wine. We'll be enjoying a different vintage with each course, Madison announced loud enough for everyone to hear. Lucille's cellar is unmatched. Derek swirled his wine and sniffed it like a pro. Excellent selection. Same producer we discovered in Burgundy last summer, right? The sommelier nodded, clearly impressed. Meanwhile, I was still trying to figure out if I was supposed to use the tiny spoon or the even tinier fork for the caviar. Ryan, sensing my hesitation, discreetly demonstrated for me by using his utensils first. Madison leaned over the table with a perfectly polished smirk. Amber, you've hardly touched your caviar, not to your taste. I smiled sweetly, just savoring it slowly. You don't get something like this every day. Madison tilted her head. Oh, of course. I forget not everyone is used to fine dining. Elizabeth must have picked up on the jab because she quickly pivoted. Madison, why don't you tell everyone about the Bali trip last year? Thank you, Elizabeth. The meal continued, course after course, lobster poached in butter, Wagyu beef so tender it practically melted on the plate, mushrooms flown in from a remote forest in Japan, and each dish came with its own wine pairing explained in detail by the sommelier. When I tried to discreetly skip the wine with one course and order water instead, Madison called it out loudly. Not drinking the Bordeaux. That bottle alone is over $2,000. Dad had it flown in specially for tonight. I kept my cool, just taking a little break. Everything's been so delicious, I want to actually remember it. Smart, she said with a fake smile. So sensible. At one point, Richard launched into one of his signature storytelling sprees, sharing tales of the early days of building his empire. Usually, I loved those moments. They were glimpses of the hardworking man behind the empire. But tonight, all I could hear was the contrast between that humble beginning and the luxury around me. Then Madison stepped away from the table briefly and returned with a small, gift-wrapped box, which she handed to her parents with a big smile. A little something to mark the occasion, she said. Inside, first-class tickets for a month-long world cruise, plus a photo album with plans for a surprise vow renewal ceremony in Santorini. Guests were flying in from all over the world. It was objectively a beautiful gift, but it made the present Ryan and I had prepared a carefully restored photo album from Richard and Elizabeth's early years feel embarrassingly small. Still, Elizabeth genuinely teared up, flipping through our album. She even held my hand when she reached a picture of Richard in his first restaurant, looking barely older than Ryan is now. But Madison couldn't resist. She leaned toward Derek and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "So creative when you're on a budget." I felt the words hit me like a slap, but I didn't let my smile slip. Not yet. By the time we hit the 7th course, yes, 7th, I was numb. Not from the wine or the opulence, but from the sheer emotional drain. I needed a moment to breathe, so I excused myself and headed to the restroom. Even the bathroom at Lucille was a luxury experience. Marble walls, fresh orchids, a uniformed attendant offering imported hand cream. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, wondering how much longer I could keep up the performance. And then, of course, Madison appeared, like clockwork. She waltzed in lips, already glossed, like she had followed me on purpose. Having a good time, she asked, adjusting her makeup in the mirror. I kept my tone neutral. It's a beautiful celebration. Your parents seem really happy. She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something, privately. Here it comes, I thought. Derek and I have decided, she said smoothly, that it would be really special if we, the children, covered the entire cost of tonight's dinner as our gift to Mom and Dad. My heart stopped. I could barely breathe. The entire bill. She continued as if we were discussing the weather. They've given us so much. It feels right. Derek and I will cover our half, and you and Ryan will handle yours. I blinked. Madison, I don't think you understand our financial situation. It's one night, Amber, she cut in sharply. One special night for my parents, Surely you can manage that without dragging your limitations into it. She adjusted her lipstick one final time, gave me a cool smile, and walked out without waiting for a reply. I stood there gripping the marble sink like it was the only thing holding me up. Then I pulled out my phone and fired off a panicked text to Ryan. Emergency. Madison plans for us to split the entire bill. We can't afford this. He responded almost immediately. What, that wasn't the plan. How much? No idea. Multiple courses, rare wines, 40 people. Has to be tens of thousands. What do we do? Don't worry, we'll talk to her. But when I got back to the table, Ryan was deep in conversation with one of his dad's business partners, and Madison was nowhere in sight. I barely tasted the final course, some intricate dessert with gold leaf chocolate mousse and a name I couldn't pronounce. I sipped water and tried not to look like I was spiraling inside. Then Madison returned and did exactly what I was afraid she would. She clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. Before this wonderful evening concludes, she said, flashing that practiced smile, the children have a little surprise. Everyone turned to look. My stomach dropped. As a thank you to our incredible parents, Ryan, Derek, and I would like to cover tonight's celebration. It's the least we can do for everything you've given us. Gasps of approval and polite applause broke out. Richard looked surprised, touched. Elizabeth looked emotional. I could feel Ryan tense beside me. He realized too late what she'd done. And then the maitre d' appeared at Madison's side with a sleek leather folder. Madame, he said quietly, as requested. She opened it, peeked inside, and passed it to Derek. His eyebrows lifted slightly. That was the only indication of how huge the number must have been. Then the folder was handed to Ryan. He opened it, and I watched the color drain from his face. He tilted it toward me. 180,000. I actually felt my chest seize. That number, it didn't feel real. It was more than our mortgage for the next 5 years. More than I'd made in the first 2 years of my career. It was unimaginable. Even split in half. 90,000. We didn't have that. We couldn't dream of covering that. The folder continued around the table. Guests murmured words like incredible, what generosity, how thoughtful, all unaware of the storm brewing at our end of the table. Then Madison strolled over, looking pleased with herself. Isn't this wonderful? She said sweetly. Now shall we settle up between couples before we present the gift to Mom and Dad? Ryan stood up clearly, about to pull her aside for a private word, but she was already pulling out her Black American Express card. Derek followed suit, handing his to the maitre d' with a casual smile. Then Madison looked right at us and dropped the bomb. Oh, Sis-In-Law, she said, in a voice just loud enough for everyone to hear. We forgot our purse and cards. Can you believe it? Derek shook his head in fake dismay. Left everything at home. What a shame. Tonight of all nights. The maitre d' hovered nearby. You could feel the tension in the air. Some guests were now watching. Ryan's face was tight with fury. Madison, he said quietly, this isn't the time. Richard from the head of the table called out, Is there a problem? Everyone went silent. I looked around the hovering waiter, Madison's smug smile, the bill folder with 6 digits staring back at us, and I just broke. The months of pressure, the subtle digs, the pretending, all of it came crashing down. Yes, I said, my voice calm but shaking slightly, there is a problem. The entire room turned toward me. Madison arranged for Ryan and me to pay half of tonight's $180,000 bill, knowing full well we can't possibly afford it. Gasps, then silence. Elizabeth's hand flew to her mouth. Richard's expression darkened. Madison jumped in. It was meant to be a surprise gift from all the kids, she said sweetly. We had no idea Amber and Ryan were having financial difficulties. Ryan stood tall beside me. We're not having financial difficulties. We're just living within our means and making responsible choices. What we can't do is drop $90,000 on a single meal. The silence stretched. I could feel tears threatening, but I refused to let them fall. This wasn't weakness. This was honesty. Finally. And then something completely unexpected happened. Richard Thompson laughed. It started as a chuckle, then built into a deep, hearty laugh that echoed through the room. Elizabeth started laughing too soft at first, then openly. Madison's confident smile faltered. "Dad, Mom." Richard wiped his eyes. "Oh, Madison," he said, finally catching his breath. "Did you really think I'd let my children pay for this?" Madison blinked. It was meant to be a gift. A gift you didn't even discuss with your brother Elizabeth, cut in her tone gentle but firm. Richard turned to the room. "I must apologize for the drama. The bill for tonight was arranged and paid weeks ago. I never expected my children to cover it." A wave of relief washed over me, so hard I had to grip the edge of the table. Ryan squeezed my hand tightly. "Madison." Her face had gone pale. "But we just wanted to," she started. Elizabeth's voice cut through. "The only surprise tonight is that you'd try to put your brother and sister-in-law in that position, publicly." The maitre d', catching the drift, stepped away discreetly. Richard addressed the table again. "Let's enjoy dessert and brandy, everyone. Family discussions can wait." And just like that, the room cautiously returned to its festivities. But I knew something in the family dynamic had changed forever. Madison stood frozen, trying to recover her composure. Her mask of perfection cracked just slightly as she glanced around the table, realizing the eyes on her weren't admiring, they were scrutinizing. Her lips parted like she wanted to explain or maybe defend herself, but nothing came out. Elizabeth rose from her chair, calm and graceful as ever, and walked over to Richard's side. She slipped her hand into his, then turned her gaze on her daughter. "Perhaps what's most disappointing," Elizabeth said quietly, "is that this entire moment didn't have to happen. You created it, Madison." Madison opened her mouth again, but this time Elizabeth kept speaking. "We've talked about this behavior before. Using money to manipulate, to impress, to punish it ends here." Madison's face flushed red. "You make it sound like I was trying to embarrass them," she said, her voice faltering. Elizabeth didn't miss a beat. "Weren't you?" Derek, usually the one to smooth things over with charm and a glass of wine, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. For the first time in years, he looked like he might actually be questioning the script. Richard addressed him directly. "Derek, I've known you for almost a decade. I've never seen you push back against this. Not once." Derek glanced at Madison, clearly unsure what to say. "I thought we were doing something nice." "No," Ryan finally spoke again. His voice was calm but firm. "You were staging a moment, a public one, a calculated one, and you did it without asking us. You assumed we'd go along because we always do." I didn't expect the words that came out of my mouth next. They just came. "That would have required empathy, something we haven't seen from either of you." Gasps again, but no one disagreed. Elizabeth stepped behind me, gently placing her hand on my shoulder. "Amber's right," she said. "Empathy isn't something you're born with, Madison. It's something you develop, and you have the resources, the privilege, and the opportunity to start learning now." The string quartet, sensing the moment had passed, began to play softly again, an elegant attempt to return the ambiance to its earlier tone. Guests shifted in their seats, some whispering, some pretending not to notice. Madison finally sat down again, no longer glowing with superiority, just quiet, composed, but clearly rattled. Richard raised his scotch glass and glanced at the remaining guests. "We appreciate everyone's patience. Family matters aren't always neat. But after 40 years together, we've learned something important. Honesty might be uncomfortable, but it builds stronger relationships than silence ever could." That brought back a few polite chuckles, a nod from Elizabeth, and some cautious applause. Still, the tone had changed. Conversations were lower. The sparkle in the room had dimmed. As dessert wrapped up, people began leaving one by one. Hugs were exchanged. Polite goodnights whispered. But the drama lingered in the air like the scent of truffle oil. When it was our turn to leave, Elizabeth hugged me tightly. "We have always seen your value, Amber," she whispered, "even when others didn't." Richard embraced me next. "Thank you for loving my son for who he is, not what he has." He made sure Madison could hear it. In the elevator ride down from Lucille, it was just me, Ryan, Madison, and Derek. The silence was unbearable. Madison stood stiff, arms crossed, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Then, right before the elevator doors opened, she finally spoke. "I'm sorry about tonight," she said softly, not quite looking at either of us. "It wasn't supposed to go like that." Ryan glanced at her. How was it supposed to go? She didn't have an answer. Our Uber pulled up. The city lights flickered in the distance as we sank into the back seat, both of us emotionally drained. "I can't believe your dad already paid the bill," I murmured, my head resting on Ryan's shoulder. "I can't believe Madison tried to pull that stunt," he replied. "Actually, I can. I just didn't think she'd be so obvious about it." "Your mom knew," I added. "She's been watching this unfold for a while." Ryan nodded slowly. "She sees everything. She just doesn't always call it out. That's Dad's job." He squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, Amber. I should have seen it sooner, should have done more." I shook my head. We were both trying to keep the peace, maybe too much. But tonight, it shifted something. When we got home, the contrast between our brownstone and Lucille felt sharp. But instead of making me feel small, it grounded me. Our home didn't have panoramic views or gold leaf chandeliers, but it had character, warmth, truth. We opened a bottle of wine we'd been saving for a special occasion, sat on the couch in our pajamas, and talked, really talked, about money, about boundaries, about how we'd let Madison get away with too much for too long. "I love my family," Ryan said, "but tonight made me realize how much I've internalized their expectations. I never questioned it before." "Your parents surprised me," I said honestly. "Especially your mom. She saw what was happening. She just waited until the right moment to step in." He raised his glass. "To doing things differently." We clinked glasses. "To not playing along anymore." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just marrying into the Thompson name. I was reshaping it. The next morning, the weight of the night before still hung in the air. Ryan and I both woke up groggy heads, a little foggy, not from wine, but from everything that had been said, revealed and shattered at that dinner table. Over coffee, we quietly prepared ourselves for round 2 brunch at Richard and Elizabeth's house. "Do you think Madison will show?" I asked, as I buttered a slice of toast. "She will," Ryan said, pouring himself coffee. "She hates losing face, but I doubt she'll be in the mood for small talk." We arrived at the Beacon Hill townhouse late morning. The place was quiet from the outside, but inside it smelled like cinnamon rolls and roasted coffee beans. Elizabeth met us at the door, still poised, but softer somehow. Warmer. "Good morning, Amber." "Ryan, come in. Maria just pulled the cinnamon rolls out of the oven. Your timing is perfect." Madison and Derek were already seated in the dining room. Madison looked like someone who had barely slept, still beautiful, still put together, but without the performance. Her usual glow had dulled into something more introspective. Derek offered a quick nod. Madison didn't look up. Richard sat at the head of the table with his reading glasses perched on his nose, sipping coffee and reading the Sunday paper. "Morning, kids," he said, folding the paper neatly. "Help yourselves. The rolls won't last long." We made our plates and settled in. For a few minutes, the conversation was light compliments on the food, the weather, a passing comment about the Red Sox. But it didn't last. Richard cleared his throat, signaling that the lightness was temporary. "I want to address what happened last night," he said plainly. "Madison, your mother and I have been thinking a lot about it." Madison straightened in her seat, her fingers nervously smoothing the napkin in her lap. "Dad, I already apologized." To whom Elizabeth cut in gently, "Because I didn't hear you apologize to Amber and Ryan." Madison glanced at us, then looked down again. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for putting you both in that situation. It wasn't what I meant to do." I gave her a slow nod. "Thanks, I appreciate that." But Richard wasn't letting her off the hook so easily. "Wasn't what you meant to do," he repeated. "Madison, we've watched you create these situations for years. The forgotten wallet when you're with Amber, the jabs about their home, their lifestyle, the pressure to spend money you know they don't have." Derek shifted beside her, clearly uncomfortable. I think he began, but Elizabeth raised a hand. Derek, perhaps this is a moment to listen. Silence. Madison's face turned a deep shade of pink. You make it sound like I've been cruel. Elizabeth tilted her head slightly. Haven't you? I've only ever tried to include Amber in our family. Madison said, defensive now. I mean, what's the point of having money if you're afraid to spend it? Ryan works for the family business. He could be earning 3 times what he is now. That's exactly the problem, Richard said, leaning forward. You see everything through the lens of money. You always have. That's not what this family was built on. He looked around the table. Do you know what I had when I proposed to your mother? $17 and a ring I could barely afford. Elizabeth smiled softly. My parents were horrified. They wanted me to marry someone with a family name. But I saw something in your father they didn't. A dream, Richard continued, a plan, and a refusal to measure life by bank accounts alone. He turned to me. Amber, you've never asked us for anything. You work hard, you live responsibly, and you've loved Ryan for who he is, not what he has. I felt a lump rise in my throat. I didn't know what to say. Elizabeth reached across the table and took my hand. We see your worth, Amber. We always have. And maybe it's time Madison starts seeing it too. Madison was quiet. For once, she didn't have a rebuttal. Then Elizabeth stood and said something unexpected. Amber, would you walk with me? The garden's still beautiful this time of year. I think the men need a moment to talk. We stepped out into the back courtyard, a small oasis, tucked behind the townhouse, filled with rose bushes, herbs, and a stone bench warmed by the morning sun. Elizabeth linked her arm through mine. There's something I want to tell you that very few people know, she said, guiding us down the path. I may come from old Boston money, but by the time I was born, there wasn't much left. The house, a few pieces of jewelry, that's it. I looked at her, surprised. My parents clung to appearances, she continued. They threw lavish dinners while we ate grilled cheese in the kitchen afterward. I watched them exhaust themselves, trying to keep up. That's why I chose Richard. He had no pedigree, but he had integrity. We paused beside a blooming lavender bush. I see that in you, Amber. You remind me of the girl I used to be, the one who married a line cook because he believed in something bigger than a paycheck. I've spent so long trying to prove I belong, I admitted. I thought if I just dressed the part or kept quiet. You don't need to prove anything, Elizabeth said firmly. Not to us. When we returned inside, something had shifted in the dining room. Madison's eyes were red. Her hair had come loose around her shoulders, and for the first time, she looked human. Richard had apparently used our absence to announce a new initiative. Starting next week, he said, as we sat down, Madison will be working directly with our community outreach programs, particularly with our scholarship recipients and employee support fund. Madison nodded, subdued. Dad thinks it'll give me perspective. And Derek, Richard added, turning to him, will be joining our employee financial wellness committee, helping our staff plan for their futures, budget wisely, practice what we preach. Ryan and I exchanged surprised looks. This wasn't just punishment, it was redirection. Richard turned to us. As for you two, Elizabeth and I want to say clearly, the way you've built your life, that's something we deeply respect. You're not behind, you're intentional, and we're proud of that. Elizabeth added, we built this family on values, not displays of wealth. You've reminded us what that looks like. As brunch wound down, something unusual happened. Madison approached me without her usual entourage, without her polished posture, and without Derek shielding her with his ever-ready charm. Amber, she said softly, glancing at Ryan, who was deep in conversation with Richard. Can I talk to you for a moment? I nodded cautiously, unsure where this was going. She took a breath like it physically hurt to exhale the next words. I owe you a real apology, not just for last night, for a lot of things. I waited. I've never had to work for anything the way you and Ryan have, she admitted. Everything's always been handed to me, and I've judged you for not having what I have when the truth is I never really earned any of it. You have. I blinked, caught off guard by the rawness in her voice. I don't expect us to suddenly be best friends, she continued, but I'd like to try again, maybe start over, not as rivals, just as two women who happen to be in the same family. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was sincere, and that was new. We'll see how it goes, I said, offering her a small, honest smile. Over the following weeks, subtle shifts rippled through the Thompson family. Madison did start working with the community outreach team. At first, she looked visibly out of place in meetings with scholarship recipients and line cooks. But something began to soften in her. She started asking real questions, showing up early, staying late. She even texted me a few times asking for help, crafting email campaigns and promotional ideas. Our conversations were short, sometimes awkward, but they were real. For the first time, we were actually building something resembling mutual respect. A month later, Ryan and I hosted a small dinner at our brownstone. It was nothing fancy. Pasta wine, a simple dessert. But we did everything together, cooked side by side, set the table with mismatched plates, played old jazz on our Bluetooth speaker. And everyone came, Richard and Elizabeth, Madison and Derek. Even a few of the extended family who'd been at Lucille that night. No one commented on the square footage. No one asked if we planned to renovate. No snide remarks about our adorable place. Instead, people passed the bread basket, refilled wine glasses, and laughed at old stories. At one point, Derek even asked for seconds. As we cleared plates, Richard raised his glass from his seat at our thrifted dining table, the one with the scratch down the middle and a ring stain from an old coffee mug. To homes filled with love rather than possessions, he said, and to family bonds stronger than bank accounts. Everyone raised their glasses, even Madison. Across the table, Elizabeth smiled at me with a warmth that needed no words. That look, that moment, it meant more than any designer bag or Michelin star meal ever could. Funny how it all started with a dinner bill that almost broke me. The $180,000 I didn't pay became the turning point in how I saw myself, not as the outsider, the underachiever, the poor relation, but as a woman who brought her own kind of wealth to the table, the kind that can't be bought. That night, after everyone left and the dishes were piled in the sink, Ryan pulled me into the kitchen and spun me around like we were dancing in a ballroom instead of our tiny cluttered space. You know what I realized tonight? He asked, his forehead resting against mine. What's that? I whispered. We're the richest people I know. And he was right. Not because of the money, but because we had love and resilience and integrity and now even respect. That's wealth. Real wealth. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your partner's family, drop a comment and share your experience. I promise you're not alone. And sometimes the very thing that makes you feel out of place might just be the thing that sets you apart in the best way. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. And always remember, true wealth isn't measured by your bank account. It's measured by the authenticity of your relationships. Until next time.